try something else. And Defence Intelligence said, well, how about a slow but sure way, release some newsletters over a period of time. So that's how The Voice was born. And they've been produced ever since.
So, in essence, this information that we're getting is officially approved information as such, or unofficially approved?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
They would deny it if they were...
Obviously, anyone connected with the programme would strongly deny its very existence. The governments wish to inform the people that there is aliens, UFOs, all the rest of it, but they can't come straight out and say so. So they do it in a roundabout way in this public education programme.
So let's get back to actually how you got into the situation that you're in today. Where does it start, and bring us up to
That's
date?
a very complicated thing, because I've virtually been involved in a sort of government survey since I was a very young child, and this survey is ongoing today. They chose certain individuals during the 50s to take part in this genetic survey. So obviously by the time I was old enough to become part of the real genetic experimentation in 1972, that's when the programme actually took over, but it still runs side by side. This government survey, one runs in this country and the same thing is run in the States, and the programme virtually took over 1972 onwards. Part and parcel of it, it's all part of
these little greys we're making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To lead us to all think there's an alien threat.
Okay.
Yeah, well that's, as I say, that is part and parcel of that same indoctrination programme.
Yeah.
It's mind manipulation.
Yeah.
They are playing with people's minds.
Yeah.
They are using genetic engineering and experimentation. They're using spare parts. That's another nasty side of things. In the mid-80s, they saw a very good way of getting in quite a lot of capital was to, because there's always a shortage with spare parts, organs.
For who?
The rich and famous.
That's right.
I mean, they might in the past have difficulties, badly need a liver, badly need this or that or whatever.
I mean, the film Coma was about that.
Exactly. I mean, they got so near to what is really going on, you really wouldn't believe it.
It's also happened to a friend of mine in 2007, and since then I found out it's happened to quite a few people in different cities around England.
Yeah, literally so many people disappear off the face of the earth. A percentage of those people, they go into the base, they don't come out.
Why do you think they want to screen everyone to find out what their blood groups are and everything? It's not, what's the point?
It's a very
otherwise?
lucrative business, and that's just a sideline of the project.
So where do the aliens come in?
Well, that's the big thing, you see. The main aims of this project is to manipulate the public's mind in a way that, there is a threat. It's from outer space. And they're perpetuating that threat. That, aliens, they're hostile, they're doing this, they're doing that. It isn't at all. The threat is really here on Earth. It's the project that's doing it.
And they are creating these generated life forms?
They are. They've made quite a few, various sorts of life forms at the base, yes.
So how do you know this information, and have you seen anything?
I've actually been to the base. I worked there between August and December of '79 in a security capacity.
Are you able to say which base?
Well, it's officially known as Peasmore, and when you came out with that I thought, crikey. That's its official title, is Peasmore. Everyone who's connected one way or another, as I said, with the programme, everyone's implanted. Now they experimented, as I said, what they said in 1979 was this is an experimental procedure we're now going through. Everyone's going through it, it's nothing to worry about. They clouded it by saying, well, what we're doing, we're seeing if we can control your fingers, your hand, by remote. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to stop the signals from your brain reaching your hand, and we're going to control, we want it to wave, we want it to play the piano with a small incision, in goes the implant, and it's as simple as that, and then we'll start taking over with the computers. Oh yeah, great, okay, I've no real problem with that.
By who? For what reason?
Well, let's give them one of their very fancy names, the elite. They've been called by lots of names over the years.
Basically, the rich, the people in, the politicians, the bureaucrats,
those at the very top of the tree.
Like it always has been.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're the administrators.
The administrators. They're the ones who are implementing all this, because, I mean, let's face it, I don't think in all probability some of the politicians probably don't know the full scale of things, and if they do, it's on an unconscious level, because I think if I went up to Tony Blair and said, excuse me, Mr. Blair, do you think you're being manipulated by aliens, he'd laugh at me. So I don't think that all the politicians know. But, I mean, you know, I think that you see, because, I mean, my mum's got friends in Strasbourg. She knows people in Strasbourg. And that they don't even know very much about this. They know that there's a computer there called the Beast, Brussels Electronic Auditing Surveillance Terminal. You know, and I've heard this from other people as well. This is common knowledge. It isn't like ultra secret stuff or anything. But you know, even the European Court doesn't seem to be made fully aware of it. The European Parliament, the British Parliament. It's the administrators, because the administrators push things in. They're the ones that bring the ideas in. It's only Parliament that puts the seal of approval on it.
Them and us?
Well, no, not that kind of exchange. Well, yeah, in a way. But apparently, I mean, the Greys apparently have got predominant usage of part of the installation on Mars, which they're using for a genetic centre for crossbreeding grey, alien, you know, ET greys with humans for their own purposes, and their purposes are to create a hybrid race because they want to become more human. They want a chance of survival, and I can understand that. But their genetic engineers come down here to help us create our little life forms, and in return they get access to genetic material. This is going to be sick, aborted fetuses, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And they get that for their own purposes, and it's kind of like an ongoing thing. Human scientists maybe go up there, I don't know. It's not lovey-dovey at all. It is utility, it's an arrangement, it is business. There's nothing lovey-dovey about it at all.
That would tie in very nicely with some of the procedures you go through at the base. You get acclimatised to hostile environments.
Yeah, I mean, the atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife.
Yeah, that would tie in nicely with that. Why they would want to do that.
You know, they don't like us, and we don't like them, and it's like we're only doing it because of what we're each going to get out of it. But the Greys, whereas the military intend to obviously get enough technology out of the Greys whereby they could actually combat the Greys and stand up to them at least, or try and obliterate them at the very worst. Whereas the Greys have sort of covered themselves by making sure that these little generated life forms, who are basically genetically related to the Greys, are programmed from the Greys' point of view too, that if it gets all too heavy, the generated life forms will turn against the military. Because at the end of the day, they're brothers, Greys and the life forms. And whereas they haven't got this individual sense of brotherhood, they've got this collective mind like ants. So you kind of like, they're very, they're not worried about sacrificing themselves, they're more like a Muslim mind, you know, or the Japanese, you know, I'll sacrifice myself for my country. The Grey will sacrifice himself for the sake of the Greys. He doesn't care because he's got no sense of fear or feeling. It doesn't matter about the individual, it matters about the collective. So from their point of view, they're quite happy. You know, it doesn't matter how many get lost because they'll just make new ones, you know, because it's like cloning. They don't have to wait 9 months.
Well, that's a very rapid procedure.
So they don't, it's like production line time. They don't have to worry about losing numbers.
And how do they work? I mean, you've got this situation where you've got Greys walking around bases here in England.
Yeah, the generated life forms, obviously they've got no reasoning powers of their own at a certain stage. So they're just like clones, you know, you tell them to do something, they'll go and do it. As a unit, as an army, yeah, they all will move as one. I mean, people have been reported, they've had abductions, and these things have been milling around as if they've been...
Just like Ed Walters,
yeah. Little pre-programmed drones. They've got a job to do, they'll just go and do it no matter what.
Workers.
This is Bases 1. Yes, in 2021 we are rejoining the very first bases, all about Peasmore. Barry King and Lisa Williams from London UFO Studies, which was in East London, came to me way back in the mid-90s, the early mid-90s, around about 93 actually. And he started talking about aliens being made in underground bases in Berkshire at a place called Peasmore, AL499. A few years after that, James Casbolt started putting stuff up on YouTube. He'd watched my Bases 1, and at the time it was just called British Bases. And Bases 2 had been shot, and that was with Ray Wardle, and some terrible things were coming to light. I have done a 2010 update on Bases 1, but Lisa didn't want it up on YouTube, so it's been taken down. And well, now we are now in 2021, and we've got somebody new, somebody who went to the same school as James Casbolt, somebody who knows about what's really going on and has direct experience about the tunnels, Peasmore, and a whole lot more things. And some of the things she has to say are truly horrific. There's been all sorts of rumours and talk, and some photographs have been released now about what's going on in the tunnels. Julie Phelps has been horrified. And but because Sophia was at the same school as James Casbolt and is talking about Peasmore, I'm not going to say welcome. Welcome is not a word. This is Basis 1, 2021, with Sophia. Welcome to Basis 1. We're going back to Basis 1. And we've got Sophia here. Is that right?
Yes.
And where do you come in on this story, Sophia?
Well, I was trafficked from a baby, and I found out that I've discovered that I was trafficked after many years of trying to work out what had happened to me, because I had been told different things by the family that adopted me, who made me believe that I was born into that family. And I was born in South Africa, but I had got a solicitor who was investigating my birth certificate and where I was born, and the solicitor employed a private investigator in South Africa, who then came back and said that the clinic I was born in didn't exist, and that perhaps I had come from a baby farm somewhere in Africa. I believe it was Swaziland, which is now called something else, but I can't pronounce that. And so the private investigator said that I probably wasn't born where I was told I was born, and that my birth certificate was probably a forgery. So the solicitor said, well, we can't do anything about that because I have ID in this country, in Britain, so we'll leave it at that for the moment. So I then worked out that perhaps my mother wasn't really my mother, my birth mother, and that my father was actually my uncle, and that my natural birth father was actually his brother, who's again my uncle. So that was that. So I was brought into this country when I was 3, but I don't believe that that's my real date of birth, that I was 3. I think I was more like 6 when I arrived in the UK.
Why do you feel that's the case?
Because nothing really added up. I mean, it didn't make any sense. My memories were totally different to what I was being told by my family, and it didn't coincide with anything.
In what way?
Well, the memories I had were completely different. I had memories of being in you could call it a village or a compound, and it was like an African village with huts with thatched roofs, and really I was speaking another language. I wasn't English. It seemed to be French. That seemed to be my first language. I remember speaking a different language, French and maybe Xhosa. And of course, I learned Afrikaans because I went from Swaziland to Johannesburg in South Africa. I remember going to, well, actually it was kind of like I went from Swaziland to Johannesburg, and then came to the family. But while I was in this village, the people that were going to adopt me would come and visit in the village, obviously to acclimatise me to them or something, get me used to them, that kind of thing. And I remember going into this place in Johannesburg now, and my mother, I have realised, my natural birth mother is actually my godmother, officially. So so she's my godmother because I'm a spitting image of her, and my youngest daughter is a spitting image of her as well.
What do you mean by the spitting image?
We look.
I mean, real. I mean,
I look like her daughter.
Or a clone.
It could be a clone.
I mean, you think it's as close as that?
It's as close as that, yes. But it's as close as my younger daughter is to me. And my youngest daughter is not a clone. I definitely gave birth to her. So I would say also that my mother, my godmother, if you like, we're very similar. And you could say clone. I think she is my mother because she feels like my mother. You know, you can tell. I never really had that kind of link with the woman who said she was my mother. So when I confronted the family and said, well, can we have some DNA tests? They refused. I offered to pay for the DNA tests and they refused. So if my daughters came to me and said, can we have a DNA test? I'd say yes, because I know they're my daughters. In fact, we were going to do the DNA test with my daughters and me because I was trying to get child support from their father, and he was refusing to pay the child support without the DNA test. So I said, okay, we'll do it. And then he paid, so he gave up on that idea because he knew that he was the father of the children. So, but that's another story. So yes, so my father, who's my uncle officially, he is a Freemason. He's also in the same lodge as my ex-husband's uncle, who my ex-husband was also trafficked as a baby. Can you mention what lodge or what version? The lodge was Reading, or one of the lodges in Reading, around that at Berkshire, and I think it's the Reading's main lodge. I'm really not sure how many lodges are in Reading. I know there's a couple, but also there could be a lodge in Pangbourne, or I don't think there's one in Pangbourne, but around that area. So it could be that lodge, but I'm not sure exactly which lodge they both belong to, because my ex-husband's uncle, who he believes is his father, he was in the same lodge as my uncle, who I believe is my birth father. So they were in the same lodge together. I have memories of my ex-husband's uncle abusing me, and but I knew my ex-husband's family, his father, his uncle, from the age of 4, or whenever I arrived in the UK, and his father left the family home when he was 4, and his supposed father moved down to his uncle, and so that's how I know my ex-husband's father and uncle and that family more than he knew them. So that because he was supposedly born in Newcastle, but he had memories of coming from Canada. My ex-husband does.
What part of Canada?
Well,
we've got stories about Canada.
Sorry?
That we've got a lot about Canada.
Yeah, he had memories of, it seemed to be like Ontario. Now, my family The people I'm connected with who bought me, they have connections with Canada too. They live by the lake in Canada. Is it Ontario Lake?
I think it's Lake Ontario.
Lake Ontario. They live near Lake Ontario. And so they have connections there in Canada. But that part of the family also have connections with Scotland. And there's a cousin with my grandmother, who's from the grandmother of the people that bought me. She has a cousin, or had a cousin, sorry, that lived on Loch Ness. And his name was Alistair. Now, I don't know.
Now, what part of Loch Ness?
I do not know.
We've had.
I don't
we've
know.
Had various musical instrument, musical band people there. Also, a certain guy who used to run a certain.
Well, she
cult.
mentioned the fact that this Alistair is a millionaire. Sorry, he's dead. So, she mentioned that he had connections with bands and things, and I don't know if it was the Beatles or.
It wasn't Deep Purple or something.
It could well have been. She never mentioned the name of the.
I know that one of the. We're talking Alistair Crowley here.
Yes, but I don't.
That's the house. Is that correct? On the south side of Loch Ness, where the sun will never actually shine on that.
It
house.
could very well be that was the connection there. Yes. She said that he was part of Wimbledon. He would choose from the ball girls and ball boys, budding tennis stars, that type of thing. I don't know what you call it, like a coach or something.
Yeah.
He would search
we're
out.
We're not talking about anything nefarious here. We're just talking about sport. Or are you talking about something nefarious?
No, I mean. Just this millionaire who's called Alistair, lived by Loch Ness. She said was like an umpire at Wimbledon. He was connected. Well, there was that connection there and everything, and he was a millionaire back then. So obviously now that would equal to being a billionaire. That kind of wealth.
What I want to establish is. Are we dealing with something which is, very unsavoury? We just want to clear the air there. Is there anything you're talking?
Well, considering that this grandmother, considering she was part of a family that was, the women were Sisters of the Star, which was the female Freemasons, and they were in Scotland, and then the fact that majority of the family are sort of linked to Freemasonry in that respect, the women and the men, I would suggest that Alistair was a Mason as well, Freemason too. So if you're seeking out ball girls and ball boys for Wimbledon, there could be nefarious dealings there too, yes.
Okay, well, we put a big coat on that. We can't. I don't want to cast aspersions if there's
no
evidence.
I'm not casting aspersions on Wimbledon.
Okay, that's
or the
very important.
tennis lawn association. No, not at all. But I mean, that was that. But Alistair, this cousin, passed away supposedly in the 1980s. Now I know.
Why do you say supposedly? Why?
Because
supposedly?
there was no funeral. There was no sort of anything about looking at his. When he passed away, it wasn't like she was invited to the funeral or went to the funeral or anything like that. It was just like, oh, he's died. But
what are you saying here exactly?
Well, I don't think he passed away. I don't think.
What brings you to that conclusion? What feelings, what circumstances are you talking?
Because I think there was more to it than that. I think he probably may have left the planet. He may have passed away or changed identity or gone somewhere else. Maybe he was never died.
What's the background there? Why are you saying those things? What makes you think about that?
Because the man, my birth father, his mother, who suffered from senile dementia, Well, he had a house on the river banks of Caversham, and she had senile dementia, but she would go on about this lizard creature man thing coming out of the river. Now, I know she had senile dementia, and you could say, well, she's confused and, you know, she's an old lady, but she was petrified of this lizard man that used to come out the river. And she would say, oh, he'd just walk across the lawn, and this house, this mansion, was on the riverbank. He built it himself.
Could you give us more details on that? Where, what river?
The River Thames, Caversham, Reading. He built the house. He designed it. Not literally built it. He had builders, but he designed this house and everything, funded it. But it was.
Was there any special design in the house?
It looked like. It looked very like South Fork, the house in Dallas, South Fork. You know, the TV series. It looked like something like that, or more like the house that Prince Andrew and Fergie had built when they were married. It was that kind of designed kind of house.
What special thing about it, apart from being on just an ordinary sort of house with rooms in it, up, down? What sort of thing that's meant to be special about it?
Well, he had. It had to be built on stilts because it's on the River Thames, so it could for flooding. They had a tennis court built. They didn't really have cellars or anything because it was on the river, so because of flooding,
and that's
as far as I know.
quite common in that area. It's not a big deal.
Sorry?
It's quite common, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very common. You have to, when you build on the river, you have to have it built on stilts because of flooding on that part of the river. It's just a bit way down. The house was just a bit way down from where the Reading Rock Festival is held, on the field further down. And this house is built further down from that field where the Reading Rock Festival is held.
Are you suggesting that there's some kind of a connection with the Reading Rock Festival and the kind of subjects we're talking about here?
Well, they knew the group. I'm going to call them the group that purchased me. They knew the person who started the Reading Rock Festival, who was the organiser. I don't know if there's any connection to that. They could have a connection with the rock festival. I just know the guy who originally organised it and everything. He was connected to the group.
Well, the main thing here is we're basing it on your personal experience and knowledge and not any suppositions.
Yes.
But expand on that.
So what I just know about the guy or the people who was involved with the Reading Rock Festival. I didn't actually have any dealings with those people or anything like that, so I can't say.
What about this thing you said you were purchased? Explain all that.
I believe that when I was in Africa in this village, I was bought, and so.
Which village? Where?
In Swaziland. And then the private investigator said, I didn't have a record in South Africa. He couldn't find me. He couldn't find the clinic. The clinic that was put on my birth records didn't ever exist. And he then went further back into my history, and he said, I believe you were purchased, or it was something to do with a baby farm, because there are many baby farms in Africa and South Africa, and there was back then in the 70s, 60s.
What exactly do you mean by baby farms?
Farms.
What for? Who was buying it? Buying the babies?
Well, these women get pregnant, they're impregnated, and then they have babies and stuff. I mean, they could be impregnated by the abusers, because it was the group I was bought by were into satanic ritual abuse as well. So
explain all that.
Well, I had memories of being the satanic ritual abuse, and the group being being part of that as well, the satanic ritual abuse.
What exactly are you referring to by satanic ritual abuse?
Well, it was very
I'm going to caution you there, because I'm going to ask questions which are going to lead to data, information for the benefit of the public. That's the purpose of this thing, benefit of the public. It may not be in your benefit, but I'll ask you something, but you don't have to answer it.
I understand.
But it's up to you. I don't want to put you through re-traumatization on things.
It's fine.
But that's why we're here. But, okay, blessings. Okay.
So, yes, so the group, it was satanic ritual abuse. It seemed that the women were above the men in the group. Women were higher in the group. The men would be lower than the women. And I had memories of this satanic ritual abuse, and there would be like places like the local church. The vicar was part of the group. They had a cover of an amateur dramatics group that they were members of, and they would use that, I think, as a cover. They also did amateur filmmaking. And with the amateur filmmaking, then obviously there was the other side of the amateur filmmaking.
What do you mean by obviously?
So it was like they would have they'd make films for competitions and things. And I say obviously because they were into Satanism.
What's wrong with just making films for creativity and learning how to use cameras and all that sort of stuff? Why? Well,
it wasn't really for that. It was just to enter competitions and so, amateur filmmaking, yeah. And then they would do historical dramas, that type of thing. But then they were also making films nefariously, or we could call it pornography, that type of thing.
Okay, go into the detail on that, because you've said things on the phone which are... Which I'm going to mention the word James Casbolt.
So, yes, so I was living in this village in Whitchurch-on-Thames, near Pangbourne, and that's in Oxfordshire. And then eventually we moved to Tilehurst, Reading, and I went to a secondary school there, and that was Steenfield Comprehensive School, which is the same school as James Casbolt went to. I believe he was at the same school as me at the same time, but I think he was 2 years below me when I went to Deanfield School.
So why would you be part of, or what's the relevance of somebody who's 2 years below you? Because how would you know? I mean, there's lots of kids there. Why did James Casbolt stand out? What's the connection?
Because he mentioned he went to Deanfield School. And then also my uncle, who I believe is my birth father, was a governor of that school, of Deanfield School.
So let's go into those details.
And the headmaster of the school lived in the village where I first came to when I came to this country. He had a house in that village as well. The same headmaster that was the headmaster when James Casbolt went to the school as well.
Now, what age are we talking? What sort of class levels are we talking about?
When I went to Deanfield School, I was in the last 2 years of my education going to GCSEs, so about 14 to 15, 16, yes. So I was about 14 when I went there. I had to go to Tilehurst Deanfield School because we were living in Oman, the Sultanate of Oman, and they closed down the English-speaking school in Oman. So instead of me going to boarding school, I came back here and went to comprehensive school in Britain, in Tilehurst, sorry, because I didn't want to go to boarding school. My rich uncle, he offered to pay for me to go to a Swiss boarding school. And I said no. So that's why I went
What
to...
sort of school, and why did you say no?
I didn't want to go to Switzerland because my adoptive father had been to the Swiss boarding school, and he went on about terrible stories about going to that school, the Swiss boarding school.
Such as?
Well, he just said it wasn't very nice. He never mentioned abuse or anything, but he just sort of would go on about how he didn't like going there. He said it was a complete waste of his time. So
I mean, it's fair to say that a lot of boarding schools, there's lots of stories, all sorts of things going on there. There's been a few films made about it, but we're not dealing with satanic abuse. It's just the sort of public school system.
yes. Well, as he is an abuser, that man, he probably was abused there. I don't know. He never mentioned it. But if he's abusing other people, he's not going to mention his abuse if he's not going to face up to what happened to him. Yeah, but I know that. So yeah, that's...
Can you tell us what happened to him?
Well, he never mentioned anything about abuse, or anything like that. He's just said it wasn't a very nice experience to go to that Swiss boarding school. He didn't.
Okay, well, you mentioned Oman. What happened there?
So my father got a job in Oman, the Sultanate of Oman, and so we went over to Oman because back then you could do that, have your family brought over to the country with the person who's working there, and so in Oman he worked for a concrete company in Oman. Now I do believe that, let's go back a bit here. So yes, so what happened was his family and that rich man I was talking about, who I believe is my birth father, they inherited the concrete company from their father, and they used to get contracts with the military to supply concrete for the laser, to shoot the laser at and things like that, and they said the laser was called Kitty. They also supplied a huge amount of concrete to the military. This concrete was supplied for all kinds of works in and around Berkshire, the south of England, that type of thing. The concrete was supplied to all the way up to Milton Keynes, all the way to the Orkney Islands, Wales, Scotland, Ireland,
now,
down south as well.
Concrete's sort of heavy stuff, and it's the sort of stuff which doesn't really travel too well.
No.
So, what the heck does this particular concrete have that it's necessary to be going to all these different types of places? I mean, if you look at different types of concrete, the stuff bridges are made of and whatever it is, and concrete expands, and usually you need expansion joints and stuff. It must have some special property that's very unique.
Well, they supplied the concrete to all these things, like all the way up through the country, all the way up to Milton Keynes, London, and went down to London, down south, down to Cornwall, the other end of the country.
What do you mean by things?
Sorry, what?
Things.
They supplied... I didn't quite get that, sorry.
Well, you said things.
What was I saying before that, sorry?
You were saying the concrete was supplied to things. What type of thing?
Well, like I say, building tunnels and stuff, underground works for the military or companies.
How do you know it was used for tunnels?
Because
and other things.
Because they would talk about it.
Who would talk about it?
All right, my two fathers. they would talk about it and things.
Your two fathers?
Well, the rich one and the father who adopted me.
So what would they say?
They would just go on about what they were doing, what they were building, and everything. And as a kid, I wasn't really paying much attention.
And what sort of age were you when
well,
that was
it was always in my life, from very little all the way up, because the company got sold when in the 80s, but my adoptive father continued working in the concrete industry, but he wasn't part of the family firm, if you like, the family concrete company, but he worked for other concrete companies. I've since found out that there is a patent for mixing blood with concrete for consistency of the concrete. I never knew that you could mix blood with concrete, but there is a patent for it.
Now, are you suggesting that's just a way of getting rid of a lot of blood?
I'm saying that's how they got rid of the blood, because I couldn't work out. When I found out about the patent for concrete being mixed with blood, explained to me what they did with all the blood, that they were sacrificing humans. These people, they were sacrificing humans, and I never knew how they got rid of the blood. There's a lot of blood, and how they got rid of the bodies and that type of thing, because it's very difficult to get rid of a body, or all those bodies and stuff, you see.
What sort of quantities are you talking about here?
Well, they would like, well, the thing is, in the tunnels and stuff, I mean, they would take, was taken to them, and
okay, let's go down into the detail here. And what about the stuff, the tunnels and stuff? Let's go right in there as far as we can.
Well, the tunnels were like, you would be like, I'd be taken to them, the tunnels and stuff.
Who would take you them, and how? From where?
Well, the father who adopted me would be taking me to these places that were building stuff, buildings, or the tunnel works, that kind of thing. And then you'd be going into down the levels.
How deep? How far down?
It seemed quite far, actually. It seemed very far
and
down.
How would you know you were going down far? Was it a lift? Or?
It was a lift. Sorry, yes, a lift.
And how many buttons does it have on that?
Well, it was like it wasn't like a conventional lift that you have in a building. It was like a kind of lift you'd have. Well, there was like there was a sort of wall of buttons, where you put the buttons for an elevator and things, and there's quite a number of buttons going on this.
What are you talking about? 10 or 12 or 20?
Well, I've been in the Sydney Tower, and that's got quite a number of buttons. Or you go to the Empire State Building, or what was the World Trade Centre. There's like a buttons like that. Have you been in the World?
Have you been there?
I've been in those, yes. I've been in the World Trade Centre before it went, and I've been in the Empire State Building, and I've been in the Sydney Tower, the tall tower in Sydney, the tallest one in Australia, I think.
I mean, those kind of towers usually have, like you go past a lot of stuff. Maybe 50. They have only. It doesn't necessarily have a lift per floor, but.
No, but in the Empire State Building, or.
Yeah.
Yes, they don't have a lift a button per floor. The Empire State, I'm just sort of saying the buttons would look like with, say, these tunnels and stuff.
Now, what sort of buttons? Because there's different styles of buttons and electrical things which are made in different generations. You've got stuff that looks from the 50s, stuff that looks
I'd say it was
60s.
more.
Is there a different style to paint?
Well, I wouldn't say they were modern,
Yeah.
like now, like you have now. I'd say it's more like 70s, maybe even going back 50s.
I mean, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for different styles which indicate that such and such a building or facility was built at a certain era.
Mm-hmm.
And did you see markedly different
Yes.
differences in that, indicating different ages?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And let's go further on that.
So yes. So this is because my adoptive father worked in the concrete industry in all kinds of countries all around the world, and the fact that my birth father has dual nationality. He's got an Australian dual nationality. He also has a lot of dealings in Australia.
So that's British and
Australia. Their sister is in Australia. She moved to Australia in the 70s. She's a Justice of the Peace. I don't know if she still is a Justice of the Peace in Australia. But then there's a branch of the family in Australia as well who own a television company over there, and I think a record company. Well, there's links with the record company as well, and a television company, and there's connections.
Is that one of the main broadcast companies or some kind of facilities?
Well, my aunt, her son works for 9 News. He's a cameraman, but she's a Justice of the Peace. She owns a publishing company in Australia. They set it up in the 70s. Now, her brother, my natural father, he had companies in Australia, and I think it was a building company in Australia. So there was building going on. There was supplying of concrete in Australia, and Tasmania, and New Zealand as well. That part of the world as well. So we've got South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and then all the way up to Canada and America, of course. They would supply concrete to, it'd be New York, Washington, Florida. They had a lot of dealings with Florida, New York, Philadelphia. Sorry?
Again, I mean, when they say they would supply concrete, I mean, would they be a company who would supply concrete from local resources, or would this stuff be shipped?
I think it was local and shipped. Yeah. Obviously, they had to they had to have cement works, gravel pits to get the supplies from which country it was. You can't just ship over a whole load of sand across the water.
Did the gravel pits have, or the resources where they got the concrete, were there any specific, specially, odd locations where that stuff would come from on any kind of energy field or energy line?
Well, in Britain, in the UK, I never went to the cement works in America. I just know they had connections in America. They were doing dealings in America and things. So where these gravel pits, if you call them gravel, these pits were, I don't know. But I do know that they were doing stuff in the places I mentioned, like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York, Washington, Washington DC rather, because there's 2 Washingtons in America.
One's East Coast, one's West Coast.
Yes. So it seemed to be more Washington DC, New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania, that part of America. There was mention of Alaska. So in Britain...
Which part of Alaska?
That I do not know.
Oh.
They just mentioned Alaska. But in Britain, the gravel pits in Britain, which they owned, the cement things, were near Seal, near Reading. There was a couple there. Buckinghamshire. That's basically where the cement, what should you call it, cement factory was as well. And there's gravel pits around there somewhere. Are they on ley lines? Probably. Yes. There's nothing. I don't know if there's any sort of connections that way in that respect. But yes, where they were digging, getting the gravel, yes, I'd say it's probably on sort of ley lines or something like that.
So was there any particular buildings or tunnels which you mentioned these tunnels? Tell us all about the tunnels.
Well,
you also mentioned Peasmore, but
yeah, they used to do stuff near Peasmore, Aldermaston, Porton Down. That I know there was sort of tunnels from around Porton Down, Peasmore, also going into Wiltshire as well, near the Longleat Park, Animal Park, the house there.
And Warminster, that's Warminster's right.
That's Warminster, yeah. The Marquis of Bath was part of the group, who's now passed away. The old Duke of Marlborough, he was part of the group, who's passed away now. His son is now the Duke of Marlborough.
To be very clear, part of which group?
Sorry, the group that bought me, who is international, and they're also in UK. They're an international group, so there's a lot of people.
Do you have any evidence to support these claims that you're making?
Well, evidence. I have evidence that I was abused because the police. I was examined by the police doctor, who said, "Yes, you have scarring. Yes, you were abused." And so that's what I have for that. That's the sort of evidence I have there. Evidence of. Sorry, evidence of what? Sorry, because I've got evidence of the fact that...
Of connecting certain individuals you've named who've now deceased with this group.
Well, they were sort of socialising with them, really, and they were like part of the group. I have memories of these people coming to these sort of occasions, if you like.
And what occasions? Describe them.
Like these... you could call them like parties, but they weren't really they were different kind of parties that you would expect.
I think the public would know them as eyes wide shut parties.
Yes, sorry, like that. Yes, sorry. Just like the eyes wide shut. Rituals, yes, kind of thing. Yes. Where everyone's dressed up in...
What happened at those parties?
Well, like, they would do the... Well, the children would all be... as children, we would go off into sort of like a different room, so all the children together. The adults were in another room, in their party, wherever they're doing their thing.
What age were you at this time? What's the sort of age range of the children?
Well, the children go anything up to 15, 14, down to baby. Little thing, babies.
How many are you talking about?
Maybe, well, any time it would be about 10 kids, or, 5.
Did they have some kind of supervisor, or have you ever heard?
Just older children, teenagers. Older, they're talking like 16, 17. The older ones would be monitoring, would be supervising the younger ones, type of thing.
And did all the children come back?
Well, the thing is, we all went to the same school. So we all went to the same primary school. So yes, they came back. There were some children that were kind of brought in, but I never saw them again. But they were I would have told they were visiting, and they were just visitors. And the children I went to school with, we would all be at the... we would all come back, yes, because we went to the same school, socialised together, that type of thing. Then you had the visitor children, who... No, I never saw them again. And they'd go off when there was this party sort of event going on.
Did they have a certain expectation or look about them?
The children?
Yeah.
They just kind of looked... They looked nervous. They didn't really kind of speak or anything. They didn't like... Well, I don't know, they didn't look like... they didn't look happy being there. But you'd think they were just wanting their mums or their dads, or didn't want to be there, really.
I mean, is there anything you can read from the body language of the people there?
Well, the children were... very nervous. They were just very quiet, very zoned out. If you see what I mean, not
I mean,
quite
do you think
there.
they were on drugs or something?
Yeah. Oh, there was a lot of drugs. I mean,
Such as?
Well, I was prescribed barbiturates from age 7, and I got this prescription, and it was a prescription from the doctors because my adoptive mother worked at the local doctor's surgery in the pharmacy department. So I was prescribed barbiturates from age 7, and that went on till about, I don't know, 11, because I asked my GP when I got older, and I said I want to see my medical records, and they said, well, we have to read them with you. And the GP was looking at my medical records, not my original GP obviously, and she just said, why were you on barbiturates from age 7? And I said, I don't know. Because she was like, well, you shouldn't be put on that drug from age 7 through to, what was it, 12, 14, I think it was, when I left this country to go to Oman. I think that's when it stopped. But yeah, the GP couldn't understand why I was given this prescription for barbiturates, and I didn't really know at the time what barbiturates were and what they did to you. So then I went and looked into it. But I was told when I was a little girl that, I had to take a tablet every night, one little tablet every night. And I asked the GP, I said, would that barbiturate tablet, would it be a little tablet? She said, yes. So I was given one every night before going to bed. I was told it was because I couldn't sleep. I was told that I was a child that wouldn't sleep. So that's why I had to have them. I told the GP this, and I said, well, I was told I couldn't sleep. She said, you don't give children your age 7 that tablet, that barbiturate every night. So when
what effect would that have? Did they say that?
What effect it had on me was I was zoning out at school during the day. I was hallucinating. I couldn't stay awake at daytime. I was really zoned out and everything. I would say that my learning ability was quite hindered in certain ways.
Well, surely the school would have picked up on this.
The school was part of it.
Okay.
The primary
which school?
It was Whitchurch Primary School.
Now, the other thing is that somebody who was with James was an Egyptian guy called Sohail. Are you familiar with him?
Did you say Sohail?
Yes, Sohail.
Well, it rings a bell. There is an Egyptian connection, yes. I mean,
I'd say, when I say Egyptian, I'd say Arab in some way.
Yeah, there is Egyptian connection and everything, because one of the group worked in Egypt and was in Egypt, basically, I would say, to get connections there, that type of thing. Sohail doesn't ring a bell, that name, but there was Egyptian connections with the group as well, because there was Egyptian people, families, that kind of thing, that moved into the village and out of the village, that type of thing. There were connections to perhaps, sorry.
Swainswick?
Sorry?
Have you been to Swainswick, I think it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Could you say anything more about Swainswick?
No, I can't remember that.
And just for the record, where is roughly Swainswick?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'd have to look into it and try and uncover it in my head, if you see what I mean.
I think it's not a million miles from Bath.
Bath. Right. Yeah.
And Rudlow Manor.
Sorry?
And Rudlow Manor.
Rudlow Manor. I mean, I know there was things at Donington Castle and at Blenheim Palace.
What do you mean by things?
Sorry.